All right, let's get going. All right, so in this video, we're gonna be looking at the Canon EOS R and whether or not it's worth buying in 2023. Now, before I get going, definitely subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the videos. We got some awesome videos on this channel and more content on the EOS R. So if that's the camera you're interested in, you know what to do. All right, so I pre-ordered this camera when it was first announced in 2018, got it the first day it was available, took it out on a photo trip to the Dominican Republic, used it, fell in love with it. It's such an awesome camera. I sold my A7 III because, yeah, it was that awesome. Now, is it still awesome in 2023? In a one-word answer, I don't want to spoil the video, but yes, this camera is absolutely fantastic. It still kicks butt in 2023. And if you think about it, this camera has been discontinued by Canon. They don't produce it anymore. So whatever's on the market's on the market and that's it. And this comes in at a price point around $1,000 or less. So you're looking at entry-level prices with a professional level sensor, and we're gonna talk about that in this video. This camera has an incredible sensor under the hood that kicks the butt of a lot of sensors on the market to this day. So yeah, in a one-word answer, this is definitely worth buying in 2023. It's an awesome camera, and at the price point, I'm gonna make the argument that there is no other camera on the market that gives you better value for money. Now we're talking everything from like usability, menu, image quality, color science, ergonomics, feel, ease of use. The whole package is absolutely incredible. And we're gonna talk about why this camera is so awesome in this video. So if that's what you're into, definitely keep watching. All right, so let's start with the sensor, the camera sensor. This camera has an incredible sensor hidden under the hood, and you might be surprised if you don't know where it came from. This video is gonna like open your eyes and you're gonna be like, what, really? And it's so cool. So we'll take off the cap and take a look at the sensor. Oh, you can't see it because Canon innovated this sensor or this shutter down mechanism. So the shutter comes down to protect the sensor from dust when you're changing your lens in dusty situations like wedding halls and stuff like that. Obviously don't poke in there, don't touch the shutter because you'll break it with your finger. But that's a really cool innovation. So if you want to see the sensor, here's some B-roll so you can see the sensor. And this sensor is quite special because back in the DSLR days, Canon had their flagship camera, which is the 1DX. The 1DX series were their flagship pro-level cameras. And one rung below that as a pro-level camera, because you had the pro-level, then you had the prosumer and the entry-level. So the two pro-level cameras in Canon's lineup were the 1D series and the 5D series. And the latest and greatest and the newest 5D camera was the 5D Mark IV, which was eventually replaced with the R5. But that 5D Mark IV had an incredible sensor in it, and that's the sensor that you'll find in the EOS R today. So that's pretty incredible. Like, if you think about it, I'm gonna kind of cut to the chase. I'm gonna talk about this at the end of the video, but bang for the buck, you're paying less than $1,000 for a sensor that's pro-level sensor that was in Canon's like professional level camera that professionals use to make money with. Like, this is a good sensor. And you can find it in the EOS R for under $1,000 these days. So if you want to talk about bang for buck, value for money, I think this is #1 in Canon's lineup. You're not going to beat this camera. All right, so let's take a look at the other cameras in Canon's lineup. The EOS R has 30.3 megapixels. If we look at the R8, it has 24.2 megapixels. The R6 Mark II, 24.2 megapixels. The R3, 24.3 megapixels. And the R7 has 32.5 megapixels. So if you want to talk about megapixels, this is still one of the best or highest resolution cameras in Canon's lineup, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The R5 has more megapixels than this. And then the R7, which we have here, arguably has more megapixels because it's at 32 instead of 30, but the R has better image quality, and we'll talk about that in the next section. But yeah, sensor is absolutely fantastic in this camera. Yes, the new sensors might be slightly better with dynamic range or slightly better with high ISO, but I mean, unless you're shooting in the dark and pitch dark, or you know, you're shooting directly at the sun or something where you need that extra dynamic range, this camera is fantastic. I have no complaints about this camera. I'll bring this as my second camera to weddings. We're filming with the R5 right now. That'll be my main camera. This will be my B camera. I bought this to be my B camera, but the R outperforms the R7, so the R7 is now the C camera. So yeah, let's talk about image quality. All right, so now that you know where the sensor in this camera came from and how awesome it is, let's talk about image quality. And the image quality in this camera is absolutely amazing. Like I said, we're filming with the R5 right now, and if I take R5 images and R images and put them side by side, it's very hard to tell the difference in image quality. They're both very clean, very crispy, as they say, very sharp, especially if you put good lenses in front of these sensors. You can tell the EOS R5 from the R because the R5 just has that extra resolution and it's extra sharp, and there's just that, it's a high resolution sensor, so you can see a lot more detail, little fine details. So that's where the R5 stands out over the R. But in terms of like the image quality out of the R, it is absolutely amazing. Image quality, I have zero complaints. This thing is still incredible, and I have no problem taking the EOS R to a professional photo shoot. Only problem is one memory card slot. So I did shoot weddings with this before I bought the R5. I've got a video about it there, also linked down below. And one of the tricks is, because obviously you're shooting a wedding, it's a live event. If your card corrupts, you can't shoot that wedding again. You can't tell the bride, hold on, we're gonna redo that whole ring ceremony. So a good trick is to have multiple memory cards with you on a wedding day if you're shooting with the EOS R, and then every hour or half hour, whatever you decide to do, just switch out the memory cards. So if the memory card does get corrupted in the camera, which, I mean, I've had this since day one, I've used a lot of memory cards, never had an issue yet, but knock on wood, if anything does happen, whatever memory card you have in there, you're already gonna lose the shots from the last time you switched out the memory card. So it's like it's a little fail-safe system. It's not the best. Obviously you want dual card slots, but in a pinch, if you have to use the R to shoot a commercial event or a wedding or a live event or something like that, just switch out the cards every few minutes and you'll always have backups of everything. All right, so now let's quickly touch on video with the EOS R. Is it still good? Should you buy the EOS R for video in 2023, potentially 2024? How does it compete against modern cameras? Well, the truth is, I really don't think people are still buying the EOS R specifically for video, but if you buy it for photo, the video capabilities are fantastic. I don't think it's a slouch by any means. It can still compete with the big boys. It just got some quirky features that people don't want to deal with, and I think that's why it really didn't fly as a video camera. But with that being said, we are currently filming with the EOS R and the 35mm f1.4 EF lens, and as you can see, the footage is sharp. Like, it is sharp, it is clean, it is like razor sharp, and I have a Tiffin Pro Mist 1/8 filter on the front of the lens, as well as a VND to keep the blacks nice and dark. But that Tiffin Pro Mist is cutting down some of the sharpness to kind of soften the edges a little bit and kind of add a little glow to the lights and stuff behind me. But it's taking away from the sharpness, and it's still pretty sharp. Now, we were filming in 4K all eye. This is 8-bit 420, and that's the first kind of, I don't want to say negative either, because it's not negative. This footage looks fantastic. Okay, so the first quirk with the EOS R is that you're shooting at 8-bit 420, and that's your bit rate. Modern cameras shoot at 422, and they can shoot 10-bit. Now, what's the difference? What does it mean in real life? Well, not much, really. With 8-bit, like, you can see the quality here. It looks really good, and I'm going to throw a color grade on it, so it's going to look like this. This is what it looks like without a color grade. And this is with the color grade, and you can color grade this footage. The only problem with 8-bit footage is if you really want to push the color grade and go crazy with the cheese whiz and add, like, you know, really mess around with the colors, the video footage falls apart. You start getting artifacting. Also, if like you shoot underexposed or overexposed and you're trying to bring things back, the EOS R does have log. You can shoot in log. Yeah, if you're trying to mess around with the color grading too much with 8-bit, you can lose a little bit and it becomes artifacty. But if you're trying to get into professional videography, I'm sure you're not going to be looking at the EOS R as a video camera. You guys are probably photographers looking at the R, and these video specs are just kind of bonus. So the other quirky thing is you have a crop. So 4K with the EOS R incurs like a 1.6 crop. So right now we're filming with a 35mm, and the previous footage with the R5 was also shot with the 35mm, and you can see that obviously it looks a lot wider on the R5 and smaller on the R, and that's because of the crop factor. So that's a good thing and a bad thing depending on what you do and how you shoot. If you like extra range and you're shooting with a 70-200, that 200mm end is going to give you a lot more range. But if you like to shoot wide, you're going to find yourself a little limited with the R, because everything, like this is a 35mm cropped onto the R, becomes like a 56-ish, 58, something like that. So if you want to shoot wide with the R, you need ultra wide lenses. I have a video right there with 2 lenses that would work really well with the EOS R. That EFS 10-18mm is really good. You can get super wide with that. So if you want to vlog, that's a great little lens for that. Although that brings me to the other quirk with the R, is it doesn't have IBIS. So for photography, IBIS isn't really a huge deal unless you're using really long lenses. But for video, if you want to vlog, you want to do run and gun kind of video, you probably want to put the R on a gimbal. You know, without IBIS, it gets a little shaky, but you do have lenses like this 15-35 has Lens IS, and Lens IS does a phenomenal job. The R also has Digital Movie IS and Digital Movie IS Enhanced, and both of those will crop in even more on your video footage, but it'll stabilize the footage in camera, which is good. And a trick you can do with the EOS R, and there's videos about this all over YouTube, you can actually film in 1080p all eye, and you can get the full width of the sensor, so your lenses will actually be wide. You'll get the wider look, but the video footage out of the R is so good that you can export that video from your editor in 4K, upload it to YouTube, and it'll look fantastic. So you can shoot in 1080p, export in 4K, upload to YouTube. And because YouTube compresses all video anyway, you really can't tell the difference between 1080p and 4K. So that's another little trick if you pick up the R and you want to get wide shots, 1080p it. And the final quirk with the R is the fact that the sensor readout speed is really slow. So if you're panning left and right, you're gonna see the wobbles, the jello. You're gonna see a lot of wobblies. Nothing's gonna stay vertical. Even though, like with this camera too, the readout speed is faster, and you still get that jello-y effect. It's just with the R, it's more pronounced. So if you have it on a gimbal and you're panning left, right, you're gonna see the lines kind of skew like this. And you know, it is what it is. That's just one of the quirks with the camera. It's got a slow readout speed for the sensor. But I mean, hey, if you're shooting talking head stuff like this, you want to shoot YouTube content or TikTok content, hey, the quality is absolutely amazing. Okay. All right, and just for funsies, we are now filming with the R7, and beside me we have the R and then the R5 footage as well, so we can take a look at all three cameras. Now, there's no difference with the settings between the R and the R7, the R5. I'm not sure what the settings were, but it's just there. You can take a look at the clarity and sharpness. Obviously, I'm trying to shoot at the best settings possible. So the R7 is set to IPB 4K fine, which is 6K downsampled to 4K, and we're shooting with the 35mm f1.4 at 1.4. We have the Tiffen Pro Mist 1/8 filter on all three samples. We're also using a Nisi VND filter as well to keep the blacks nice and dark. And the only difference the only difference with the R7 over the R is that I had to bump up the ISO on the R7 to 400 from 200 because it's an APS-C sensor. It's smaller, it gathers less light. So we are getting more light into the camera at ISO 400. So this is what it looks like. This is the R7 versus the R versus the R5. And I don't know what this footage looks like, but you guys let me know in the comments down below. I'll see it when I start editing, but let me know. What do you think? Which footage do you like best? And all three of these are also not color graded. The camera is an auto white balance, so the colors you're seeing are the colors right out of camera. All right, so looking at the footage here, when I look at the footage right out of camera on this 4K screen, I can definitely see a difference between the R and the R7 in terms of resolution. The R is just a lot cleaner and crisper, but I exported some test footage and I looked at it side by side as you looked at it just now on your screen, whatever you're looking at. And once it's exported for YouTube and, you know, runs through the computer, you really can't tell the difference between the R and the R7. Like if you get really close and pixel peep, I zoomed it into 150%, you can kind of see that the R is a little bit sharper, but for social media, like I'm wrong. I'm completely wrong. I thought the R would be a lot better, but as you saw, it's pretty close. All right, back to the video. All right, so let's talk about usability or funness. I find this, I don't know how to explain it, but this camera is more fun to use than the R5, more fun to use than the R7, more fun to use than most other cameras. Like I've been a professional photographer for 19 years, and the way that this camera just fits in my hand and just the layout of the buttons and everything, I just really like it. The only thing I'll complain about is I wish that the on-off switch was on the right side here by the shutter release, but that's neither here nor there. This camera is discontinued. Canon is not making it, so I don't think they're going to change it anytime soon. Oh, and by the way, yes, it is discontinued, so if you want to buy one, you're going to have to like scoop it up quick because who knows how long these reserves of these cameras are going to last, how long it's going to be on the shelves. So if you want one, buy one. You can get good deals on eBay as well. So yeah. Okay, so one of the big differences, or one of the things I really like about the R is the grip. If you look here, we have the EOS R5, which has the same body as the R6 and the R6 Mark II. And you can see that the R has a grip that's slightly tapered in, and that just fits into the palm of my hand a lot better, and it just feels more comfortable. I don't know why Canon changed the grip. I'm gonna keep griping about it. Hopefully Canon watches one of these videos and brings the R grip back, because this was by far the most comfortable grip they've had on any camera, and probably the most comfortable grip I've held on to in 19 years as a photographer. Now, when it comes to button layouts and like customizable buttons, flippy screen, all that kind of stuff, like, you know, all these things. You've probably researched this camera already, and I have no problems with the button layouts. It looks pretty good. Obviously, the R has this, what's it called? A touch swipe bar? No, the multi-function touch bar. And this was a bit of a hit and a miss with people. Personally, I find that once you get used to using it, you don't miss the joystick. In fact, I made a video talking about life without a joystick, and you use the screen here to move your focus point around. And if you use the screen to move the focus point around, using the screen is way faster than the joystick ever was. So once you get used to using the screen, you won't even go back to the joystick unless you're flicking through the menu or something. Yeah, usability and funness is definitely a check. This is a great camera to use. All right, so if I were buying an EOS R today, my big question would be autofocus. How is the autofocus on this, let's say, compared to a newer camera like the R7 or the R5? I think the EOS R performs very similarly to the R5. The R5 is obviously better, and the R7 is the best out of the bunch. It's designed to be like a sports and wildlife shooter, so the stickiness of that little square just sticks to whatever, and it just stays locked on. And the autofocus on this is absolutely incredible. But the R is no slouch either. It has, if you buy this camera, make sure you're upgraded to the latest firmware, by the way. Link over there and also down below. If you want to check out the firmware, definitely do your firmware updates, because it'll give you all the extra autofocus features and things like that. And you definitely want that, because right out of the gate, when this camera came onto the market, it didn't have eye tracking autofocus. It didn't have all those fancy features. Those are things Canon added later in firmware, which made this camera really good. And I can tell you from my experience shooting weddings, shooting with this lens here, this is the 85 1.2 EF version, and you can use this lens with a Canon adapter, or you can use a third-party adapter. It doesn't really matter. Here we have a JJC adapter here on the 16-35, and it works flawlessly. Like, this is a notoriously slow focusing lens to begin with, and its focus is just as slow on the EOS R. The 16-35, on the other hand, is a very fast focusing lens. This is super quick, and it's super quick on the EOS R. So if you're using new glass, like RFL glass or just regular RF glass, focusing works just fine. If you're using old EF glass, focusing works great. So autofocus is fantastic. The one thing I'll say though is that with the newer cameras, you'll get the box around the eye and it'll be locked on the eye and it won't move. And in my experience shooting weddings, when you get a certain distance away from your subject, the camera stops putting a box around the eye and puts a box around the head. But you can be confident in the fact that the camera is going to focus on the eye part of the head, even though the box isn't on the eye. And you know what? After using the R and the R7 and other cameras, I kind of like what Canon did there, because I find the box around the eye distracting, especially if you're like the type of person who likes to shoot emotions or capture expressions. When you have a box around somebody's eye, it messes with the shape of their eye and the eyebrow, and it hinders you from being able to see the expression clearly. So I think it was probably Canon wasn't intending to have a box around the head instead of the eye, but I do prefer this autofocus setup. And yeah, no issues with autofocus on this camera, although the stickiness isn't as good. So if you're shooting erratic things, that's one thing to think about. Yeah, autofocus, not the newest autofocus, but definitely more than enough for most people. So autofocus, thumbs up, it's a pass. All right, so let's look at who is buying the EOS R. Now, I don't think, I think I watched Pirates of the Caribbean recently. Anyway, so yeah, so who's buying the EOS R these days? I don't think professionals are buying this camera anymore, simply because if you're running a business and you're professional, you want to buy a more expensive camera because you can write it off and that goes against your taxes. So they'll probably go for an R5, R3, R6. So, and if we look at the price point of this camera, it's below $1,000 now. So I really feel like the people who are interested in the EOS R, and if that's you, welcome to the channel. I think people who are just getting into photography are going to be looking at this camera seriously, because you're paying an entry-level price for a camera with a professional level sensor, which is crazy. I mean, you're paying this and you're getting this. Because that R5 Mark IV, when it came out, was a, what, $3,500 camera, $3,000 camera, something like that. And that sensor's in here. And like, that's awesome. And by the way, If you are new to photography and you want to learn about photography and you want to see some tutorial videos about photography, definitely subscribe to the channel. I've been doing a lot of gear reviews talking about lenses and cameras, but starting September, I'm going to start rolling out tutorials talking about composition, lighting, rule of thirds, exposure, triangle, which doesn't really make sense because there's more than 3 ways to expose a photo. But yeah, I'm going to be doing more tutorials on photography. So if that's what you're interested in, definitely subscribe. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, I think this is an entry-level camera now. And I mentioned earlier, this is discontinued. So if you want to buy one, go grab one while you can. Now, the thing with the EOS R is the fact that it's more of an advanced camera. So if you're a newbie to photography, it's going to be a little bit above your pay grade, so to speak. But if you're serious about photography and you want to learn, yeah, man, this is a great deal. Great bang for the buck. Image sensor, video quality, everything is really good here. And you know, you can learn how to shoot aperture priority mode, shutter priority mode, full manual. It's got FV mode, which is awesome. And you can really master your craft with this camera. Just take it easy, step by step. Come back to this channel, subscribe, watch my tutorial videos. But yeah, you can definitely take this camera and turn it into a business. This is a professional quality sensor in here. And if you're thinking about buying, let's say an R5 or an R6 Mark II or an R8 or an R7, I would say buy this first and take the money that you save on the camera body and buy yourself some nice RF glass. Now, as somebody who's been a photographer for 19 years, I can tell you cameras come and go, but lenses last a long time. Like this 85 1.2 is still with me today and it still functions perfectly on this body. I would say invest in glass. Save money on the bodies, invest in glass, because over time you replace bodies every so often, every so on. I mean, this has 200,000 shutter clicks. It's rated for 200,000 shutter clicks, so it's gonna last you a long time, but cameras die, shutters die, you replace them, you get newer cameras with better tech, new features and that kind of thing. But lenses, you keep lenses for your whole career. So invest in lenses, save money on the body, and then once you get clients and you start making more money, then buy a better body. All right, so now we're filming with the EOS R and the 16-35. We're gonna close out the video and it tracks my face, no problem. This old EF lens with the R body works absolutely fantastically. So, ultimate question is the EOS R worth buying in 2023? Absolutely. I think the EOS R is a killer camera. It is absolutely awesome. The features you get, the bang for the buck, value for money is absolutely amazing. And sure, yes, you can buy an R5 or maybe an R5 II when that hasn't been announced yet, but it probably will be announced by the time you watch this video, or if you're, anyway. The point I'm trying to make here is that the features you get in the EOS R are good enough to serve you for a long time. And the features you'll get, let's say in an R6 Mark II, R5, R5 II when it comes out, are the features in those cameras worth the extra $2,000, $3,000 in value that you're going to pay for that camera? And I'll submit to you that probably not. You get eye autofocus with the EOS R, you get tracking with the EOS R, you don't have IBIS, so if you're shooting video, that might be a bit of a thing for you, but if in photography, IBIS really doesn't make much of a difference. You have lenses that have Lens IS to compensate for that if you really need stabilization. Image quality, fantastic. Sensor is fantastic. Shutter's rated for 200,000 shots, so it's not a camera that's gonna die on you. But yeah, bang for the buck, value for money, EOS R. I strongly recommend it. I think it's a great starter camera, an advanced starter camera, but if photography and videography is something you want to take seriously, might as well jump in and learn how to use it, learn all the features and things like that. Okay, if you have any questions about this camera, leave them down below. This video is over. Peace out. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a comment. I would really appreciate it. It helps this channel grow. So I will see you guys in the next video, and if you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe to the channel.